the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape.
Welcome back to Real Talk Horror Edition, the podcast where we unravel the spine-chilling mysteries of horror films, peeling back the layers to uncover what makes them tick and why they linger in our minds. I'm your host Josh, and this season we've been diving into the realm of psychological horror. Today we're continuing part 3 of our series titled Trauma and Transformation. This is where we explore films that use personal grief, emotional turmoil, and fractured relationships to build a foundation of unease. These stories often force characters, and us, to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Whether it's a deep-seated guilt, a haunting betrayal, or the breakdown of one's identity, these films don't just scare us. They unsettle us on a much deeper, more personal level. Our featured film tonight is 2004's Secret Window. This is a Stephen King adaptation that brings a mix of mystery and psychological tension to the table, or at least it tries to. Directed by David Koepp and starring Johnny Depp, this movie had all the ingredients to be a standout entry in the psychological horror genre. A talented cast, a script based on a King novella, and a director who knows how to craft suspense. But as we'll discuss, something about it just doesn't quite hit the mark. I'll be honest, I went into this film with high hopes. I mean, who wouldn't? It's Stephen King, the master of psychological torment. His stories have a way of crawling under your skin, pulling you into the minds of his characters, and forcing you to feel their pain, fear, and confusion. Secret Window, however, left me feeling more disappointed than disturbed. It's a film that had so much potential, but struggled to live up to its premise. But maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. Is it a film that deserves a second look? Did I miss some nuances in my first watch? Or is it simply a case of unrealized potential? Today, I'll dig into the Secret Window, the good, the bad, and the could have been. So whether you've seen the movie and have thoughts of your own, or you're here to decide if it's worth a watch, buckle up. We're about to get psychological. Grab your popcorn, dim the lights, and let's uncover the secrets behind Secret Window. At the heart of Secret Window is Mort Rainey, a reclusive writer whose life is spiraling out of control. From the moment we meet him, Mort exudes a sense of detachment, not just from others, but seemingly from himself. He's grappling with the fallout of a failed marriage, a stalled writing career, and a creeping sense of personal failure. Enter Shooter, a menacing figure who accuses Mort of plagiarizing his story. Shooter's arrival introduces the central tension. Is Mort being gaslit, or is he gaslighting himself? The film leans heavily on this dynamic, threading a palpable sense of paranoia as Mort's interactions with Shooter escalate. Every step of the way, Secret Window asks us to question whether Mort is a victim of external manipulation or a master of self-delusion. In theory, this premise should make for an intricate game of cat and mouse. Unfortunately, the execution falters. While Mort's paranoia is intriguing, the film struggles to maintain the intensity needed to sustain true psychological manipulation. Instead of feeling trapped in Mort's unraveling mind, we're often left at arm's length, observing rather than experiencing. Now, in the perception versus reality is where the film truly aims to shine. The gradual unraveling of Mort's reality is the backbone of Secret Window. From strange occurrences in the isolated lakeside cabin to the eerie presence of Shooter, the film pulls us into a world where nothing feels solid or trustworthy. As the narrative unfolds, we're constantly second-guessing. Are the threats Mort faces real, or are they the manifestations of his deteriorating mental state? The film uses classical psychological horror techniques like unreliable narration and shifting perspectives to keep us off balance. However, while the setup is strong, the payoff is less so. The climactic reveal, the notion that Shooter is a figment of Mort's fractured psyche, feels predictable. The breadcrumbs leading to the twist are a bit too obvious, robbing the reveal of its intended impact. Instead of a gut punch moment that leaves you reeling, it's more of a nod and a shrug. I saw that coming. Now, Johnny Depp's portrayal of Mort Rainey is perhaps the film's most compelling aspect. He brings a quirky, almost disheveled energy to the character that makes Mort feel layered, at least on the surface. From his rumpled bathrobe to his sarcastic quips, Mort is a character you want to root for, if only to see him pull himself together. But beneath the eccentric exterior, the film fails to dig deep enough into Mort's psyche. His struggles with grief and betrayal, core elements of his character, are hinted at but not fully explored. Instead, the film leans on Depp's performance to carry the weight of Mort's mental collapse. It's only in the final act, when the truth about Shooter is revealed, that we get a glimpse of Mort's darker, more complex layers. Unfortunately, by then it feels rushed and underdeveloped, leaving us wishing the film had spent more time exploring these facets earlier. And then there's the fear of the unknown, and in many ways, Shooter embodies this theme. It's played with a quiet menace by the great John Turturro. Shooter is an enigma. His southern drawl, his cryptic threats, and his insistence on justice make him a figure of dread, but also one of intrigue. For much of the film, Shooter is an ever-present shadow over Mort's life, a personification of his fears and failures. His ambiguous motives and unclear identity should make him the perfect antagonist for a psychological horror film. Yet the film's handling of Shooter veers towards predictability. Rather than letting his mystery simmer, the story pushes him toward a resolution that feels more like a formality than a revelation. The fear of the unknown is most effective when it lingers, when the answers remain tantalizingly out of reach. In Secret Window, the mystery unravels too neatly, and the fear dissipates too quickly. Secret Window has all the ingredients for a gripping exploration of psychological horror. A protagonist on the edge of sanity, a shadowy antagonist, and a narrative that blurs the lines between reality and illusion. But its failure to fully commit to these themes leaves it feeling hollow. There are moments where the film captures the essence of psychological tension, but they're fleeting, overshadowed by an over-reliance on tropes and a lack of depth. While it's clear that Secret Window aims to explore mind games and perception and the fear of the unknown, it ultimately scratches the surface rather than diving into the psychological depths that define the best of the genre. A film's atmosphere and tone are vital in psychological horror, setting the stage for unease and immersing us in the protagonist's fractured world. In Secret Window, these elements are both a strength and a missed opportunity. Let's dive into the details of how the cinematography, sound design, and setting create and sometimes limit the film's tension. The cinematography of Secret Window succeeds in creating a sense of claustrophobia and isolation. The film employs muted tones, soft grays, washed out blues, and shadowy interiors to reflect Mort's mental state. The muted palette creates a subtle tension, reinforcing the idea that Mort is living in a world drained of vibrancy, much like his own psyche. Close-up shots play a significant role in capturing Mort's unraveling. The camera lingers on his disheveled appearance, the dark circles around his eyes, and his increasingly erratic expressions. These visual cues help us feel Mort's growing paranoia and isolation, even when the script doesn't explicitly state it. However, while the visual style effectively sets the tone, it lacks the boldness seen in other psychological horror films. For instance, films like we've talked about The Babadook or Black Swan use exaggerated visuals or surreal distortions to plunge us directly into the protagonist's psyche. In contrast, Secret Window opts for a more restrained approach. While this works to some extent, it can leave the atmosphere feeling subdued, failing to fully capitalize on the potential for visual storytelling in Mort's descent into madness. Sound is a powerful tool in psychological horror, and Secret Window uses it to build tension, though not always to its fullest potential. The score, composed by Philip Glass and Jeff Zanelli, provides a subtle, eerie undercurrent that complements the film's psychological themes. The music often feels restrained, almost hesitant to take center stage, which mirrors Mort's passive, slow-burning journey into mental collapse. This restraint works to the film's advantage, allowing moments of silence to dominate and amplify the tension. And here's where the sound design really shines. It's in those unsettling silences. The stillness of Mort's lakeside cabin is frequently broken by creaks, distant winds, and the occasional ominous knock on the door. These sounds do more than just establish setting. They create a constant sense of foreboding. Each creak of the floorboard or rustle of the wind feels like a reminder of Mort's vulnerability and the unseen forces closing in around him. However, while the sound design succeeds, the score itself often falls short of elevating the film's intensity. In more impactful psychological horror films, the music plays a pivotal role in guiding our emotions, ramping up the anxiety during climactic moments, or creating unbearable tension during quieter scenes. In Secret Window, the music feels almost too subtle, failing to push the atmosphere into truly nerve-wracking territory. Now, few settings are as iconic as isolated cabin in the woods, and Secret Window leans into this trope with mixed results. The cabin itself is a reflection of Mort's deteriorating mental state. Its worn-down interior, cluttered with signs of neglect, mirrors his unraveling psyche. The surrounding woods, dense and seemingly endless, contribute to the film's sense of isolation. Mort's physical separation from the world reinforces his growing detachment from reality, making the cabin a perfect stage for paranoia and introspection. But here's the catch. While the cabin is visually and thematically appropriate, it feels underutilized. The film misses opportunities to fully exploit the setting's potential to heighten suspense. Imagine if the cabin's creaks and groans were more pronounced, if the woods surrounding it became more active, menacing presence. Instead, the setting often serves as a mere backdrop rather than an integral part of the story's tension. For example, films like The Shining or The Witch use their isolated settings to build an almost unbearable atmosphere, where every shadow and corner feels alive with threat. In Secret Window, the cabin and its surroundings never quite achieve this level of intensity. They're atmospheric, sure, but not haunting. The tone of Secret Window walks a fine line between suspenseful and subdued. While it captures a general sense of unease, it rarely plunges into the depths of true psychological horror. This inconsistency can leave us feeling like the film is holding back, hesitant to fully commit to its darker, more unsettling themes. Moments that should feel tense, like Mort's escalating confrontations with Shooter, are undercut by the film's restrained atmosphere. There's a sense that Secret Window is playing it safe, opting for mild discomfort over genuine fear. In the realm of psychological horror, atmosphere and tone are everything, and Secret Window delivers a mixed bag. The cinematography, the sound design, and the setting all contribute to the film's sense of unease, but they barely push beyond the surface to create something truly immersive. While the film captures moments of tension and paranoia, it often feels like a missed opportunity. With a bolder visual style, a more dynamic score, and greater use of its setting, Secret Window could have transformed its atmosphere from passable to unforgettable. Instead, it remains a film that flirts with psychological depth without fully embracing it. A film's success in psychological horror often hinges on its characters. Their complexity, or lack thereof, can make or break the story's tension and emotional resonance. In Secret Window, the characters show promise, but fall short of their potential, with a protagonist, antagonist, and a supporting cast that only partially fulfill the demands of the narrative. Mort Rainey, portrayed by Johnny Depp, is the heart of the story, and his unraveling mental state is central to the plot. Depp delivers a performance that blends Mort's disheveled eccentricity with his mounting paranoia. From his disinterest in basic hygiene to his sarcastic deflections when confronted with adversity, Depp brings a quirky charm to the character, which initially draws us into Mort's world. However, beneath Mort's quirky facade lies a deeper darkness, one that the film struggles to fully explore. His descent into madness is portrayed as a gradual erosion, but I don't think the script delves far enough into the psychological underpinnings of his breakdown. While there are hints of unresolved trauma and emotional repression, especially tied to his divorce and professional insecurities, these themes remain surface level. One of the more intriguing aspects of Mort's character is his unreliable perspective. The film uses Mort's skewed perception to build tension, making us question what's real and imagined. Unfortunately, this potential is undermined by the predictable narrative arc. The big reveal, rather than feeling shocking or cathartic, is telegraphed too early, leaving Mort's psychological journey feeling like a box-ticking exercise rather than a deep exploration of his psyche. And John Turturro's Shooter enters the story as a menacing figure, embodying the fear of the unknown. With his deliberate speech, unsettling calmness, and ominous hat, Shooter immediately feels like a looming threat. Turturro's performance strikes the right balance between eerie and enigmatic, adding a layer of unease to every interaction with Mort. Shooter's ambiguity is initially a strength. He appears as a ghostly specter of Mort's guilt, a figure who could be real or a manifestation. This uncertainty keeps us on edge, wondering whether Shooter is a flesh and blood antagonist, or maybe just a figment of Mort's imagination. However, as the story progresses, Shooter's character becomes more one-dimensional. The film's reliance on the split personality twist, a trope that has been explored more effectively in other films, undermines Shooter's initial intrigue. By the time the truth is revealed, the psychological tension tied to his character dissipates, leaving Shooter as a narrative device rather than a fully realized antagonist. The supporting cast plays functional roles in Mort's story, but they lack the emotional depth needed to have a lasting impact. Maria Bello as Mort's estranged wife Amy serves as a catalyst for much of the film's conflict. Her affair with Ted, played by Timothy Hutton, and subsequent divorce proceedings fuel Mort's feelings of betrayal and inadequacy. Bello's performance conveys Amy's frustration and concern, but her character feels underdeveloped. She exists primarily as a plot device, representing Mort's lost stability rather than a fully fleshed out individual. Timothy Hutton's Ted is similarly one note. Positioned as the other man, Ted's role is to antagonize Mort further, adding fuel to the fire of his unraveling mind. While Hutton's portrayal captures Ted's smug arrogance, the character lacks nuance, making him more of a caricature than a compelling foil. Even Charles S. Dutton as Mort's private investigator Ken Karsh falls into this trap. Karsh is introduced as a grounded, pragmatic counterbalance to Mort's paranoia, but his presence is fleeting. His character could have been used to dive even deeper into Mort's deteriorating reality, providing contrast that highlights Mort's mental collapse. Instead, Karsh is relegated to a minor role, his potential contributions to the narrative largely untapped. The true shortcoming of Secret Window lies in its inability to fully explore the psychological complexities of its characters. Mort, Shooter, Amy, and the rest of the cast each have the potential to contribute to a rich, layered story. However, the film opts for surface-level interactions and predictable character arcs rather than diving into the emotional and psychological depth of these individuals. With a runtime of only about an hour and 36 minutes, I can't help but think with about 20 minutes more, they could have really fleshed out these characters. For example, Mort's strained relationship with Amy could have been a window into unresolved grief and insecurities, adding emotional weight to his unraveling. Similarly, Shooter could have been more dynamic representation of Mort's fractured psyche, with their interactions diving into themes of guilt, denial, and self-destruction. The film had the room to grow and to add those things. Instead, the characters feel more like chess pieces moving through a preordained plot. In Secret Window, the characters serve their narrative purpose, but rarely do they rise above it. Mort Rainey as the protagonist captures our attention, but doesn't invite us into the deeper recesses of his mind. Shooter begins as a chilling enigma, but loses his edge as the film progresses. The supporting cast, while competently formed, exist more to move the plot along than to provide meaningful contributions to the story's emotional and psychological resonance. Ultimately, Secret Window feels like a missed opportunity. A film with the building blocks of great character-driven psychological horror, but lacking the depth and nuance to make its characters truly unforgettable. Symbolism and subtext are integral to psychological horror, serving to deepen the narrative and provide us with layers to uncover. Secret Window employs visual metaphors, psychological symbolism, and thematic undercurrents that hint at greater meaning, though its execution often feels incomplete. Let's unpack these elements and see where the film succeeds and where it falters. First off, the titular window stands as one of the film's most prominent symbols. More than a physical feature of Mort's cabin, it represents his fractured perspective and growing disconnection from reality. Windows often serve as boundaries between the internal and external world, and in Mort's case, they reflect his struggle to confront the truths of his life. He looks outward but is trapped within, unable or unwilling to address the chaos inside his mind. Another recurring visual motif is the cornfield, which features prominently in Mort's dreams in the climactic scenes. Cornfields in horror often carry a dual symbolism. They can represent growth and fertility, or concealment and decay. In Secret Window, the cornfield serves as a metaphor for Mort's buried psyche. It is a place where secrets are hidden, literally in the case of the bodies, but also where suppressed guilt and trauma lie dormant, waiting to resurface. Despite its potential, the cornfield imagery feels underdeveloped. The film hints at psychological depth, but doesn't fully capitalize on the visual language it introduces. And Mort's unraveling mirrors classic themes of guilt, denial, and suppressed trauma. His deteriorating mental state is a direct manifestation of his inability to accept responsibility for his actions. Shooter is a character that can be interpreted as the embodiment of Mort's guilt, a projection of the darker aspects of his psyche that he refuses to acknowledge. The climactic twist, revealing that Mort and Shooter are one and the same, brings this symbolism into focus. However, the revelation feels more like a plot device than a meaningful exploration of the psychological toll of guilt. The idea of a fractured psyche grappling with buried truths has been executed more effectively in other works. Fight Club and Black Swan immediately come to mind, where the psychological symbolism is woven seamlessly into the narrative. In Secret Window, the balance between thriller elements and deeper themes is uneven, leaving the symbolism feeling somewhat superficial. Now, at its heart, Secret Window reflects on the isolation of creative minds and the psychological toll of betrayal. Mort's life as a writer is portrayed as one of solitude and vulnerability. His secluded cabin, once a retreat, becomes a prison where his insecurities and unresolved issues fester. This depiction of creative isolation speaks to his mental fragility that can accompany a life of introspection and artistic pursuit. The theme of betrayal, both personal and professional, is another driving force. Mort's wife's infidelity and the alleged plagiarism accusation are betrayals that chip away at his sense of self. The film gestures at the ways betrayal can distort one's perception of reality, but it never really goes deep enough to leave a lasting impact. There is an opportunity here to explore the social pressures on artists, expectations of originality, the fear of irrelevance, and the fine line between inspiration and appropriation. Ultimately, Secret Window touches on these themes only in passing, choosing instead to focus on its more conventional thriller elements. One of the film's greatest shortcomings is its reluctance to fully embrace its symbolic and thematic potential. The visual motifs, such as the window in the cornfield, hint at rich layers of meaning that are undercut by a lack of narrative depth. Similarly, the psychological symbolism tied to guilt and trauma is overshadowed by the predictability of the plot. While the film's themes of isolation and betrayal are relatable and compelling, they're only explored at a surface level. A more daring approach could have integrated these themes into the story's structure, using them to heighten both the horror and the emotional resonance. For example, Mort's struggles with creative stagnation and personal failure could have been woven into the mystery of Shooter's identity, creating a more layered and thought-provoking narrative. Secret Window has the framework of a psychologically rich story, but its symbolism and subtext often feel like missed opportunities. The visual metaphors are intriguing but underdeveloped. The psychological themes are compelling but unevenly explored, and the social commentary remains on the fringes of the narrative. For a film rooted in psychological horror, these elements are crucial to creating a lasting impression. While Secret Window succeeds in presenting intriguing ideas, it never goes far enough to fully immerse us in the deeper, more unsettling truths lurking beneath its surface. Instead, it leaves us peering through the window, wondering what could have been. A film's pacing and plot structure are the backbone of its ability to captivate and engage its audience, particularly in psychological horror where timing is everything. Secret Window tries to balance a slow burn build-up with moments of escalating tension, but it ultimately stumbles in key areas, leaving its climax and resolution feeling underwhelming. Let's take a closer look at how the film handles pacing, twists, and its overall structure. The film begins as a slow burn, immersing us in Mort's isolated world. The pacing here is deliberate. It allows us to sit with Mort's loneliness, his fractured mental state, and the eerie quiet of his lakeside cabin. This slow build-up is one of the film's strengths, as it effectively mirrors Mort's descent into paranoia. Shooter's introduction adds a layer of urgency, but the tension simmers rather than boils. Scenes like Shooter's ominous accusations, the cryptic notes, and the mounting sense of being watched create a palpable sense of unease. These moments are where Secret Window shines, drawing us into the psychological web. However, as the narrative progresses, the slow burn approach begins to lose its grip, weighed down by predictability and a lack of deeper intrigue. As the story here hurtles towards its climax, the pacing takes a sharp turn. The deliberate tension of the first two acts gives way to a rushed conclusion that sacrificed the nuanced atmosphere for a quick payoff. The gradual unraveling of Mort's psyche, which should have been the film's crowning achievement, is instead delivered in broad strokes. The twist that Shooter is a figment of Mort's fractured mind arrives with little fanfare. For those familiar with psychological horror tropes, it's not only predictable, but also underwhelming in its execution. What could have been a shocking revelation feels telegraphed, robbing the moment of any of its intended impact. The film's reliance on a twist ending, without the necessary groundwork to make it truly resonate, is one of the most significant structural missteps. The twists in Secret Window, they're thematically fitting, aligning with the story's exploration of guilt, identity, and repression. However, they lack the element of surprise that makes psychological horror memorable. Shooter's true nature, as Mort's dark alter ego, is revealed in a manner that feels less like a puzzle falling into place and more like a checkbox being ticked. To its credit, the film does attempt to plant subtle clues throughout, such as Mort's fragmented memories and Shooter's cryptic statements. But these hints are often too heavy-handed, making the twist more of an inevitability than a revelation. For a genre that thrives on subverting expectations, Secret Window plays it too safe, adhering to familiar beats without injecting fresh energy or depth. The conclusion of Secret Window aims for unsettling ambiguity, but lands with a thud. After the twist is unveiled, the film quickly ties up loose ends, leaving little room for us to linger in the psychological aftermath. Mort's complete transformation into a deranged, guilt-ridden killer should have been a moment of chilling realization, but it feels contrived and abrupt. One of the most significant missteps is the lack of emotional resonance in the resolution. We just spent 90 minutes following Mort's journey, yet his ultimate fate, his descent into madness and moral collapse, feels disconnected. The unsettling potential of Mort's final line, "The ending is the most important part," is diluted by the contrived nature of the events leading up to it. Instead of leaving us haunted, the ending feels more like a perfunctory conclusion to an otherwise engaging setup. Secret Window had all the elements of a compelling psychological horror: a reclusive protagonist, a menacing antagonist, an isolated, eerie setting. Yet its pacing and plot structure failed to fully capitalize on its strengths. The slow burn atmosphere is initially effective, but falters under the weight of a rushed final act. The twists, while thematically appropriate, are too predictable to pack any psychological punch, and the ending fails to leave any sort of lasting impression. The film could have benefited from a more layered approach to its twist and pacing. For example, introducing additional red herrings or diving deeper into Mort's psyche might have added complexity and kept us guessing. Allowing the story to linger in its final moments, rather than rushing to a resolution, could have created a more unsettling and memorable conclusion. Secret Window is a film with great potential that struggles to maintain its momentum. Its slow burn opening effectively builds tension and really immerses us into Mort's world. But the rushed final act and overly predictable twists undermine the psychological impact. The conclusion, rather than leaving us haunted, feels more like a missed opportunity. In the end, pacing and plot structure are what separate good psychological horror from great psychological horror. While Secret Window offers glimpses of greatness, especially in the first act, its failure to fully commit to these themes and twists ultimately leaves it feeling somewhat incomplete. A film's true impact is measured not only by its immediate reception, but by the legacy it leaves within its genre. For Secret Window, the ripples it made in the world of psychological horror were modest at best. While the film has its moments of intrigue and boasts a strong cast, its overall execution fell short of achieving lasting resonance. Let's examine how Secret Window fits into the genre, how it was received, and what, if any, legacy it has carved out. When Secret Window opened in 2004, psychological horror was no stranger to stories about fractured identity and unreliable narrators. Films like Sixth Sense, Fight Club, and the others had already set a high bar, exploring similar themes with greater originality and emotional depth. In comparison, Secret Window feels like a lesser entry, a film that borrows heavily from its predecessors without bringing anything distinctly new to the table. Its use of the split personality trope had been more effectively explored in films like Psycho and the John Cusack film Identity. While it competently navigates the psychological breakdown of its protagonist, it fails to push boundaries or reimagine these well-worn themes in any kind of fresh way. One area where the film could have made a unique contribution is its commentary on the psychological toll of creativity. Mort's struggles as a writer offer a promising starting point, but this theme remains underexplored, leaving little to set Secret Window apart in the crowded landscape of psychological horror. Upon its release, Secret Window garnered mixed reviews from both critics and audiences. Johnny Depp's performance as Mort Rainey was a standout element, with many praising his ability to embody the eccentric and unraveling writer. Depp's portrayal added a touch of dark humor and charisma that elevated otherwise lackluster material. However, the film's lack of originality was a frequent point of critique. Both critics and viewers noted its reliance on predictable tropes and its failure to deliver a truly impactful twist. For fans of Stephen King's work, the film's adaptation of his novella, Secret Window, Secret Garden, felt diluted, with some of the more unsettling aspects of the story softened or omitted entirely. The tepid reception prevented Secret Window from becoming any sort of standout entry in the genre. While it had the benefit of King's name and Depp's star power, it wasn't enough to lift the film above mediocrity. Over the years, some films initially dismissed by critics find redemption as cult classics, embraced by niche audiences who appreciate their quirks and imperfections. Unfortunately, Secret Window has not followed this trajectory. While it has a small and dedicated fan base, often drawn by Depp's performance or the cozy yet creepy atmosphere of the lakeside cabin setting, it lacks the elements that typically elevate a film to cult status. Cult classics often succeed because they take bold risks, they defy conventions, or resonate deeply with a specific audience. Secret Window plays it too safe, sticking to formulaic storytelling and refusing to take the creative leaps that could have made it a beloved oddity. Even within Stephen King adaptations, Secret Window remains a footnote rather than a highlight. Films like Misery, The Shining, and It have left marks on the genre, while Secret Window struggles to escape the shadow of its more ambitious peers. Ultimately, the legacy of Secret Window is one of unfulfilled potential. It had all the ingredients for success: proven source material, compelling lead actor, and a genre ripe for psychological exploration, but it never capitalized. Instead, it exists as a competent but unremarkable film, one that fans of the genre might watch once, but you're unlikely to revisit. That's not to say Secret Window is without merit. Its atmospheric setting and moments of psychological tension make it enjoyable, if predictable, experience. And for those new to the genre, it can serve as a gateway to more complex and impactful horror films. However, in the broader context of the genre and Stephen King adaptations, Secret Window remains a minor entry, an example of what happens when safe, formulaic execution takes precedence over bold, visionary storytelling. Secret Window may not have reshaped the landscape of psychological horror, but it remains a curious artifact of its time. It's a reminder that even with strong source material and A-list cast, a film needs risk, originality, and emotional depth to leave a lasting mark. For fans of Stephen King or Johnny Depp, it's worth a watch, but for those seeking psychological horror that really sticks with you, there are better windows to peer through. So let's get to my final thoughts and my rating. Secret Window is a film that walks the line between being a competent psychological thriller and an underwhelming missed opportunity. It has the foundation for greatness, a Stephen King story as its backbone, an intriguing premise centered on paranoia and identity, a talented cast led by Johnny Depp. Yet, despite these promising elements, the film struggles to transcend its mediocrity. At its best, Secret Window delivers moments of genuine intrigue and unease, largely thanks to its atmospheric setting and Depp's engaging performance. However, these moments are fleeting, and the film ultimately feels constrained by its safe and formulaic execution. It teases deeper psychological exploration, but never fully commits, leaving it feeling hollow compared to other, more daring entries in the genre. Let's talk about the strengths. What works? You've got the performances. Johnny Depp's portrayal of Mort is the film's highlight. He brings this eccentric charisma as a reclusive writer. He balances Mort's humor and paranoia with a degree of authenticity, and he keeps us invested even when the script begins to falter. John Turturro also deserves recognition for his menacing portrayal of Shooter, at least for the first 2/3, although the character's potential is undercut by the overly telegraphed twist. And there's the atmosphere. The lakeside cabin setting is beautifully crafted to evoke isolation and unease. Its desolate surroundings and muted tones mirror Mort's deteriorating psyche. It immerses us in his growing paranoia. The sound design with its eerie silences and sudden creaks further enhance some of the tension. And then there's Stephen King's signature style. While the adaptation doesn't fully capitalize on King's story, it retains enough of its thematic DNA, particularly that exploration of guilt, betrayal, and just how fragile the human mind is, to give us a taste of his unique brand of psychological horror. But then we have to look at the weaknesses. Where does it fall short? And the predictable twists. The central twist, though thematically fitting, is far too predictable for psychological horror. The genre thrives on subverting expectations, and Secret Window just fails to deliver the kind of shock that leaves us reeling. Instead, it shows its cards a little too early and diminishes the impact of the climactic moments. And then there's the lack of psychological depth. While Mort's unraveling is the crux of the story, the film barely scratches the surface of his psyche. The exploration of themes like guilt and suppressed trauma feels superficial, leaving little for us to ponder once the credits roll. Compared to other psychological horror films that dive into the protagonist's minds, Secret Window feels emotionally and intellectually shallow. The film's conclusion attempts to tie its themes together, but it feels more contrived than chilling. The resolution lacks the ambiguity or psychological weight needed to leave a lasting impression, making it feel like a missed opportunity to elevate the story. So where does it fall for me? Secret Window earns a 5 out of 10. It's not a failure, but it's far from exceptional. It's a film that does enough to be entertaining, particularly if you're a Stephen King or Johnny Depp fan, but it won't stick with you. It won't compel you to revisit it. It's a competent thriller for a rainy afternoon, but it lacks the emotional and psychological heft that really defines the best in the genre. So who will enjoy this movie? Well, Secret Window is best suited for Stephen King completists. If you're a fan of King's work, you'll find some enjoyment in seeing this adaptation, even if it doesn't rank among the best. The casual thriller fans, those who enjoy lighter psychological horror without too much complexity, may find the film's straightforward approach appealing. And the Johnny Depp enthusiast, Depp's quirky and committed performance is reason enough for his fans to give the film a chance. However, for viewers seeking a gripping, thought-provoking psychological thriller, there are far better options available. Things like Sixth Sense, Black Swan, King's Misery offer more depth, originality, and lasting impact. Or you could just go with David Koepp's earlier film, Stir of Echoes, which is far superior to this, and one of my favorite unsung horror films of that time. I loved Stir of Echoes. Maybe we'll do an episode here down the road. But I think, for me, it's not without its merit, but it's a film that feels constrained by its own potential. It's competently made, with strong performances in that atmospheric setting, but it really falls short of delivering any kind of psychological punch that we know defines great thrillers. For casual viewers or fans of the cast, it's worth a single watch. For those seeking a memorable exploration of the human mind's darker corners, this window may leave you wanting. And for those of you that like the deeper, read the book. It's short. The little novella take you 3 hours. Great story. Got a lot more darkness. Much more worth your time. And it helped me. I read it after I watched the movie, so I was able to picture Johnny Depp and John Turturro as I'm reading it. Wonderful, wonderful book. Now, I want to thank you, as always, for joining me on this deep dive into Secret Window. I hope you enjoyed exploring the psychological twists and turns with me, even if the film didn't quite live up to its potential. And if you did enjoy the episode, I'd love for you to help us grow the Real Real Talk horror community and the regular Real Real Talk community. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you've got a moment, leave me a review to let others know what they can expect from the show. Your feedback truly means the world to me. And if you're on social media, don't forget to follow us and connect. I'm on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Real Real Talk. I occasionally pop onto Twitter or X at Real Real Talk Pod. Also on email, the Real Real Talk at gmail.com. Come, check us out, talk to us. I'm always eager to hear your thoughts, especially if you have your own take on this film, or if there's a particular psychological thriller or horror flick you think deserves to be discussed. Come check us out, hang out with us, share your comments, and let's keep the conversation going. And we've only scratched the surface on Stephen King's world of terror, because in psychological horror, King has written a lot. Next time, we're going to be tackling 2007's 1408, another chilling King adaptation that dives into the terrifying reality of grief, loss, and the horrors of the mind. I think this one will keep you questioning what's real and what's a manifestation of terror. So if you're a fan of mind-bending psychological horror, this one you won't want to miss. Until then, stay safe, stay spooky, and always remember, when it comes to the world of horror, sometimes the scariest thing is the reality we're afraid to confront. Keep questioning what's real, and we'll talk to you next time.
Creeping through the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape. Twisted game, fear and terror stake their claim. Footsteps follow close behind, haunting thoughts invade your mind. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll always stay. Windows rattle, doors they creak. Ghostly whispers start to speak. Every corner hides a fear. Close your eyes, they're drawing near. Candles flicker, spirits call. In the night they'll take it all. Midnight strikes, the clocks rewind. Nightmares now are intertwined. They'll wait, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll always stay.